Hi, this is Rob Wade of Emotionally14.com, conductor of The Crazy Train, player 1 at the E14 Gamecast, and the supreme leader of Talk Star Wars. You're listening to Mike and the Genuine Chit-Chat podcast, and I commend your good taste.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week I'm once again joined by Aidan Rosewell. Now, if you checked out last week, you'll know that Aidan is the host of two podcasts, one called The Room, which is a fictional interview-style podcast, and the other which is Days of My Life. And Days of My Life is a audio drama, but it's based on the true events of the life that Aidan has led. So all the things in there are true and happened, and it's some of the stories you hear are absolutely crazy. So before even checking out this chat, I really recommend people go check out Days of My Life. It is incredible. So obviously last week me and Aidan spoke about mainly sort of his drug issues in the past, his travelling to India and finding himself and that sort of thing. The discussion sort of continues on that sort of track this time. I won't bore anyone, especially any new listeners, with too many details or spoil the chat. But we basically speak about Aidan's stance on sort of redemption along with his spiritual and religious ideology, things that addicts need to do to be able to help themselves along with support networks and things like that, how Aidan changed to become a parent, as well as how one would teach their children things about drugs, if anything, what sort of opinions people have on that sort of thing. The transitional phase our society is in, uniqueness and normality, like loads and loads of different things in this conversation. But if you liked last week's, then I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. If you haven't gone back and listened to part 1 of this, I do really recommend you do so. But if you don't, it's not a necessity to. Now, at the start of this little podcast, you may have heard a friend of mine, Rob Wade, introduce the show. He's from Emotionally14. I've included a link to the podcast, or network, kind of, in the description. I don't think they're quite a podcast network. They're just quite like a big banner of quite a few things. They've got the Crazy Train podcast that is amazing. They've got the E14 Gamecast that is also amazing. And they've also got Talk Star Wars. And they've got a few other shows on their sort of network associated with them and things like that. But I really recommend people, especially the nerds among you, go check out Emotionally14. As anyone who knows this show knows that I am a massive nerd. Star Wars is especially close to my heart. So, go check out Emotionally14. That's about it from me at the moment, guys. I'll be back at the end of the chat just to give an overview of what's coming up in the coming weeks, what's happening. I forgot to mention in previous episodes, and I'm very sorry about this, guys. Next week, I'm actually going to be in Italy on Sunday, and so I'm not going to be releasing a podcast. So I do apologise. There's going to be a week break, which is quite bad considering last year I don't think I really had any breaks, and this year I've had 2 because of Mexico, or it was a longer break actually. I think it was 2 weeks not when I was in Mexico, and then also this is going to be the 3rd week. So sorry for all you hardcore listeners, guys. I'm just on holiday. I'm going on a Saturday. I'm not going back to Wednesday, and doing the work to be able to get a podcast out is just going to be far too much. So I'll talk more about that at the end, but I just wanted to let people know who listened at the start, just in case. So anyway, I'll stop rambling now. So thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. I really hope you enjoy the chat. Go give Aidan Rosewell some love, and I'll talk to you at the end. Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton.
Yeah. And again, with the same thing with, doing mushrooms or acid, it's completely normal in a lot of cultures for people to go on like vision trips, or you've reached an age of maturity where you're going to try and expand your consciousness. Like me and my friends did it. They were like lifelong friends. We were really safe. We did it in a safe place. We planned it, and it was really cool, but I couldn't tell anyone about it. I couldn't tell like my peers and stuff. If I went into a job interview and they said, could you describe a time in your life, when you made a big change or something really positive? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, once me and my friends, we went and we all dropped a bunch of acid, and I felt connected to the universe in this way where I felt safe and that I didn't have to worry, and that we were kind of all connected, and that I could see this kind of energy, and it really reassured me. I don't think I'm getting that job, because they go, well, okay, that guy's a fruitcake, but that's my truth. That's my truth that happened, and I genuinely wish that other people could experience that feeling. It was something that I would recommend to people, but I was lucky. I had friends that were safe, and we planned it. And, as we've just illustrated, often it will be someone who's just kind of taking a risk, and it shouldn't be such a big risk.
Exactly. And, there's also parts that come along with that, which is, there's a podcast called Say Why to Drugs, and it's by by a woman called Dr. Susie Gage. It's part of the Distraction Pieces Network, which is what Scroobius Pip's podcast is on for any big pod fans of his. And Dr. Susie Gage, she's from Bristol, I think, and her speciality is researching how recreational drugs affect people in different ways, I think primarily the mind. And her podcast, every episode's about half an hour long or so, and it does a completely unbiased factual review of each drug in a way that it's not it's not anti-drug. They do it with caffeine, they do it with tobacco, they do it with e-cigs, they do it with alcohol, and they do it with sugar, but they also do it with cocaine, MDMA, cannabis, etc. And they basically say exactly for certainty what the studies have shown, what the data shows of each of these things. And what they've said, like Scroobius Pip, he's open and he said that on the show that he's done acid, he's done this and he's done that. And, once again, I don't want to delve into my personal life, but I have at least at one point taken an hallucinogen. So I am aware of what it can be like. And in all honesty, like the biggest problems that come with that as well as cannabis is, an example would be an old friend of mine in college I don't really hang out with or haven't seen in ages. Basically, we smoked cannabis together when we were in college, when I was 16 or whatever, and he used to get anxiety about it. He used to feel bad because, it's illegal, you get into trouble, blah, blah, blah. And then he went to Amsterdam, and when he was in Amsterdam, completely fine. Not even a worry at all. He never got any panic attacks, never felt sick on the cannabis, nothing like that. And it's because obviously over there, it's fine. No one cares that you're doing it. It's legal, essentially. But it's like, a lot of the things with acid or mushrooms, if you give someone who's drunk mushrooms or acid when they're out in a club or there's some random house party, it's probably quite likely they're going to, or at least higher chance of them either freaking out or having a horrendous time. But if you educated people and said, look, you can do acid, you can do shrooms, you can do whatever, but you need to make sure you're with some people who know what they're doing. You need to be people who you're comfortable with. You need to be in an environment that if you start feeling bad and going wrong, that you move where you're sat in the room, you change the music, you eat something that got sugar in it, like all these little things. But people aren't told this because they're just told drugs are bad, so they take these drugs, and if something bad does happen to them, like if I have a house party, people come over my house parties and doing cocaine in the bathroom, one of them starts to OD or something, if I call the police, I can get in trouble. And that immediately is just all these layers of danger that people associate with drugs. Is so much of it is the legality. And once again, I'm not saying sweeping, let's just legalize everything tomorrow and you can buy it in a corner shop. It's not that simple. It's a very complex issue. But it's one of those where a lot of the issues that come with it is, as you say, the social stigma with it, the people worrying about, getting into trouble and things. And then when trying to be reasoned with, like you guys were with the police officers and saying, hey, look, you shouldn't do drugs, they're bad. Well, you're like, well, people have been telling me that for ages, so I'm not going to listen to anything else you're going to say now, even if some parts of it are valid.
Yeah. Again, it's a cultural thing. I think that's the disparity, that when you walk along the street and you're seeing some dude walking along the street smoking a spliff, I look at that and I think that's antisocial. Because I'm like, I don't want to smell your weed, dude. And also, why are you smoking it when you're walking down the street? Like, why aren't you sitting down in a cafe or listening to some music or talking to a friend? I'd liken that to walking along drinking a bottle of wine in public. I'd look at that and I'd go, hey, dude, you're on your own, it's the middle of the day, why aren't you at home or in a bar or something like that? I think that's where you start to get these disparities, and also the judgments, because you get the judgment of a drug user being someone who must be a criminal in some sense. And that just vilifies younger people, literally, and it makes you into a criminal. And, from a young person's point of view, you're saying, hey, I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. I've never been influenced by gangster rap, but I mean, look at some of the imagery in gangster rap. It is all about smoking weed every day, sipping Jack Daniels, and that's their way of life, and if you're impressionable to that sort of thing, it just reinforces that message of like, this is something to do. Look at me, I'm a fucking rap star. I've got beautiful women around me and I drive this car and I don't give a fuck,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I wonder, so I'll slightly go off the drug discussion now, because we've been talking about it for a long time, even though it's always interesting to speak about that and things. But I want to ask, we lightly touched this slightly earlier, but I wonder if you could disclose some of your, if any, spiritual views or views of not only the universe, but also if you think anything happens after death or anything. I want to clarify, I'm an agnostic atheist, so I'm kind of I've got my own opinions on things, but I'd be very interested to hear what your thoughts are of if you have any spiritual beliefs.
It's kind of hard for me. I sort of describe myself as an atheist, but then I kind of flip to agnostic atheist. All of the kind of spiritual work that I've tried to do on myself, or kind of humanist work that I've tried to do on myself, eventually you hit the wall. No matter what you study, whatever church you go to, you hit the wall where someone proclaims to have the idea as to what happens, and I don't ever see any evidence that there is anything after the life that we have. So it's an ongoing thing for me. I suppose I'm a bit of a hypocrite in the sense that, my mum died 20 years ago and I call myself an atheist, but I still talk to her, like if I'm having a really shitty time or like I've got something really stressful on, I'll sort of say, Mum, if you're up there, can you help me out with this one? So an atheist doesn't do that, right? So I guess what I would go with is that in my emotional heart and in my emotional self, I believe that there is something more than we can see, and definitely something more than we know. And I'm happy for that. I'm happy to let that be a mystery. And I think the sooner that you can get to that, however you do it, the acceptance of, I'm not going to keep sort of torturing myself with what if, and is there something that I can read? Is there some practice I can do that can take me there? I think the sooner that you get to, I'm going to let that be because I've got this time now. I think that's as kind of religiously, spiritually profound as it gets. The Zen thing, the enlightened mind, the idea of living in the present moment, taking your breath and being grateful, and seeing life as an experience, without being passive, and not closing off to stuff. I think that is, when you describe it like that, that sounds hard enough to achieve. So why make it any harder for yourself?
No, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't have. I know it's quite trendy. You get people like Ricky Gervais and other people along that kind of route. That it's kind of fashionable to say, no, fuck off atheism. You get one life and then you're dead, and all of that sort of stuff. And I think, I think that just feels too kind of Loganistic for me to go with that. I can't escape the fact that my mum's been dead for 20 years and I still talk to her. And that kind of tells me that I believe that there's something.
Yeah. Well, it's a very balanced perspective on it. I mean, with myself, I used to be, when I was in school and things in college, I was quite a strong atheist. I'd argue with people about religion. I'd think down about people who were, Christians or Catholics or any other sort of religious ideology. I'd just be like, well, there's nothing. You just die. That's the end. Easy. And then, I don't know if it was some of the experiences I had through college or after Dad passed away or what it was specifically. I don't think it was like a turning point per se. It was just like a gradual idea of, I kind of came to terms with the fact that there may be some degree of life after death, but it wouldn't be the way of life we understand it. Maybe our consciousness lives on in some other astral being or way, and we go into other way of being. I don't know. Maybe this is just a step in the ultimate stairway of life, of just varying examples of it. I don't know. No one knows. And the way I kind of look at it is, I think similar to what you were saying, is the only thing everyone on Earth knows for 100% certainty is that there's at least one life. No one knows if there's 2 or 10 or 1,000,000. No one knows that, but we know we have this one. So just be as nice to each other as you can now, and then if there is another life, we can worry about that afterwards. It's if you're just a good, nice person to relatively everyone and try and be the best person you can be. I've said before, if there was a God and I died tomorrow, went up to heaven, and he said, no, you need to go to hell, and I'd be like, well, why? He was like, well, you lived a good life and everything here checks out, but you didn't believe in me. I'd be like, well, I don't want to worship you then. I'd rather go to hell. Like, it's that, I don't believe in those things, but it's that sort of ideology where it's like, if there was really a God and there was really some sort of deity that controlled everything or whatever, depending on how strongly you think the deity is connected with our lives, if they're that intelligent and powerful and all that, they should be quite understanding to understand that if they put you in these situations that they, they're meant to be, God's meant to be omnipotent and omniscient and all-knowing or powerful or this or that. And it's like, well, surely he already knows that if I've lived my life through this way and my parents died and this happened and that happened and all the evidence has been put forward to me for being an atheist, then they would realise, oh no, well, being an atheist, yeah, that's fine. Like, it makes sense. So I'm always that sort of, with religion, I like the spiritual side, I like the community side, and I like the idea, but I don't like the application, which is just, our way of doing it is right, or your way of doing it is wrong, or, I believe this, so you shouldn't be able to do that. That's when it all gets really hazy and squirrely for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like you're saying, the idea that we are somehow kind of lower and that there could be a higher power that is in some way judging us, scrutinizing us, testing us, I think that's a load of bollocks. I think anything that has the capability to observe us or to give us what we call life and consciousness, they must be loving and they must be kind. It's the idea of that in my life I'm going to have to answer to some higher power who's going to look at my life and kind of give me like some kind of data feedback. Similar to you, I would turn my back on that. I think again, the sooner you can get back to the fundamental kind of principles of humanity, of compassion, kindness, forgiveness, all those things that resonate in all the different religions, you're safe. If you stick with those in life, you are safe, No,
exactly. I 100% agree. And it's such a weird one as well with the whole religion thing, but kind of leaning from that onto something else we kind of spoke about is I want to get your opinion on redemption in a sense, because obviously you're a gentleman who, when you were younger, you were doing a lot of drugs, doing this, that, and the other, and I imagine doing some other things as well, which were potentially not very favourable or very considerate of others. And then, you had this journey, and then you came out the other side, and you're like, okay, I want to try and be a better person, and you obviously got to where you are today. And I want to ask, it's an interesting question, because religion is a really weird one about it, depending on who you talk to, but what do you think there's always time for people to get redeemed? Is there with, especially with drug addicts and things like that, there are people in society that a lot of people just look at it in a really black and white way and just go, oh, you're addicted to drugs. That is 100% completely your fault. It's easy to not to do. If you're addicted to heroin, it's easy to stop doing heroin because you just stop, and that's the end of the problem. People have this very narrow view of it. So I want to ask, I don't believe that. I want to clarify, I don't have that view on drug addicts, but there is obviously a degree of they have to take some charge in their life. But with redemption, do you believe that the people don't get enough chances nowadays to actually redeem themselves, and society far too often will kind of paint someone with one stroke of the brush, and then you can never come back from that?
I think ultimately it is down to perception, and it's down to the individual's perception of themselves, and I think that is always redeemable. I think that redemption for oneself can be found and fought for and lived out, depending who you are and what the context is. It can be a lot harder than other people. You meet people in my professional life. I work with a lot of vulnerable people that have got substance misuse issues and so on. For a while, I managed a homeless shelter, a frontline homeless shelter for chaotic sort of in off the street people. So I'd meet people who were habitual heroin users, 30 years plus, lost their children, body falling apart, and you could see in them that they had no hope of redemption for themselves. They were kind of surviving, winging it, hoping that something good might happen, but without the tools to do it. I think, one of the things that you have to do if you're going to try and be a good member of society is to offer people that chance of redemption, and to see that, so often we live in this world where we're so quick to judge and to condemn somebody who actually they're trying to do the best they can. Yeah, they're fucking up, they're making mistakes, and they're maybe mistreating people, But I think there's a very, very small amount of people that are actually waking up in the morning and saying, today I'm going to hurt somebody else. I'm going to make their life worse. I want to make that person suffer, or I want to have a negative impact on my life. I think even the most chaotic and kind of troublesome people, the people that need the most time, wake up in the morning and they probably first thoughts are that, they feel scared. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how they're going to get through the day. And, that behavior plays out. So redemption, to the extreme example, listening to one of your previous episodes when you were talking about Adolf Hitler, it's something that I throw out time and again, and it's always interesting to throw this out to people and to test their faith, or test how kind of I guess how congruent they are with themselves, is to say that Adolf Hitler as a person was doing the best he could. He didn't wake up in the morning and think, right, I'm fucking King Nazi, I'm going to murder a load of Jews and I'm going to love this. He had ambition and dreams and fears and problems, but he was actually trying to do the best he could. He got it completely fucking wrong.
Yeah, 100% wrong. He had the initial intentions of making Germany better again. I mean, obviously, neither of us are pro-Hitler. I'm glad for that. Any other listeners, we're not saying, Hitler did nothing wrong. Obviously, he did some of the most heinous acts in human history. But at the beginning with, especially, he was trying to do the best for Mother Germany, and he got them out of the hyperinflation crisis quicker than I think it's Teddy Roosevelt's the only other person who's done it in world history that quickly, of getting them out of a case of having a million German dollars, whatever they were, being worth a few pennies, and it not being the entire economy was screwed over. And he sorted that out, and he did a lot for Germany before it became this, the concentration camps and the Holocaust and all that sort of horrendousness. It was, in his own warped view, to begin with, he was fine, he was doing things whatever, but when he started to try and take over places from Germany, and when he was trying to kill Jews and stuff, obviously, as we both say, it's definitely the wrong thing to do. But in his warped perspective, him doing those horrible things was for the betterment of his country, and that's what he was trying to strive for.
You see, the thing for me is, if you're really committed to sort of religion or spirituality or prayer or compassion or so on, you should put your guru on a pedestal. So if that's Jesus, if that's Buddha or Krishna or whoever, the Pope, you should also put on the same pedestal Adolf Hitler, and not to just be sensational about it, but to say, where do you start to have compassion for him? Is it when he invaded Czechoslovakia, or is it when he blew his own brains out, or when he did that? Where's your line where you start? And it doesn't have to be Adolf Hitler. You can start with everyday stuff, Donald Trump or whoever you find pushes your buttons. That's your invitation to then say, right, this person makes me feel angry. Why does he make me feel angry? And if you trace it back, it'll come down to, Donald Trump makes me feel angry because I feel like he's probably not doing a very good job, and he doesn't care about people in the same way that I do. That's compassion. So it's his lack of compassion that makes me feel angry, but really it's in me. So I need to find a way of being compassionate towards him. I need to find a way of saying, you're not evil, you're not racist, you're doing the best you can. I really wish that you would do it in a different way. I really wish that you would not use some of the language you use, or maybe think more before you say things. And that's where redemption starts. Because it's like me in my life. If I look at myself and I think, I dropped out of school, I didn't get any education, I was using a lot of drugs, I messed up a lot of relationships. I used to break into my school and smuggle drugs around, and, didn't treat some people very well. At what point do I kind of start saying, okay, but why did I do that? What was I? Because I was actually trying my best, and I think that's a very grounding kind of way. Clearly, if someone comes into your house and is going to attack you, you have to fight back. It's okay to defend yourself. But after you know that you're safe, and after you know that this person is not attacking you, that's when you have to start thinking, okay, why did that person come into my house? Well, why? They must have been so on a trip to get somewhere that they risked actually doing that. They must have had really strong feelings about it. I want to understand that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point you bring up there, especially obviously using the specific extreme example of Hitler and the still not as extreme, but still quite a hot topic with Trump and things. And it is that almost, if you ask a religious individual, okay, would you forgive Hitler? Most people would say, or let's say most people would say no. You go, okay, well, if he killed half the amount of Jews and people, would you redeem? They go, oh no, definitely not. I go, okay, what if he killed one Jew? Do you think he's redeemable if he did everything great he did for Germany and he killed one Jewish individual and then immediately after he regretted and asked for forgiveness? And then I imagine most people would be like, well, I suppose you could. I go, okay, what about 2 people? What about 3? What about 10? And then it gets this really weird grey area of like, well, how far... It's obviously, as you say, it's looking inward, it's looking at yourself as an individual of how far would you let someone go before you allow them to come back. And it is a really nerdy reference that's just come to mind, and I am sorry about this, but I always bring it up in podcasts, is Star Wars. Darth Vader, I assume, have you seen Star Wars, the original?
Yeah.
So, cool. It's quite a big pop culture icon by now, so I'd hope so. Darth Vader, he killed Obi-Wan in the thing. He's shown to be very evil. If you read the comics or see anything else about him, or even Anakin in the prequels, he kills a lot of people, and it is horrendous a lot of the time. But then at the end of Return of the Jedi, he sacrificed himself to save Luke and whatever, and he becomes, he dies, and it's all redeemed and stuff. And it's like, well, no one watches Star Wars and goes, no, that's bullshit. He shouldn't be redeemed. He's still awful, blah, 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 blah. Or maybe some people don't, and I don't talk to them. But it does bring up that interesting concept of, where is the line? Where do you stop letting people? And I think, as you say, it's the compassion, and also part of it is how much they want to improve themselves. A drug addict a lot of the time doesn't want to be addicted to heroin, and so they're kind of almost stuck in a loop a lot of the time, or they feel like they haven't got any other options and that sort of stuff. So it is looking inward and seeing what you can see about their situation, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how far they've gone down the wrong path, and if you're willing to allow them to bring them back. And another part of it is with addicts, which is one thing my friend Reese actually said, which is very insightful, which is the problem is with most addicts is a lot of them don't necessarily want to stop doing drugs. What it is, they want to stop doing drugs. Do you see what I mean? Like they don't want to necessarily stop heroin. What they want to do is be in the mindset and the stable place enough to be in the set where they do want to not do heroin, if you see what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, that's the nature of addiction, and also the paradox of how you sort of, try and relate to someone and support them, because, again, like if someone's attacking you, you've got the right to defend yourself. That's where you can park your compassion. Okay. In the same respect, if you're trying to help somebody who needs to make a change in their life, so like I was in my professional life, taking people that are on the streets, they're injecting heroin, coming into a place, the kindest thing there is to say, this is the structure and this is the way out. And if you can't follow that, then the most compassionate thing I can do is say that you're not allowed to, because for me to allow you to have some false idea that it's okay to keep behaving the way you are, then I would actually be doing you more harm. And I care about you enough to say that this is a solid structure way out. And if you can't find it on your own, then I'm offering to help you, and I will support you. But if you lie and start using again, or if you tell me that you're going to do something and then you don't, then the trust is gone. But that's about working between, two people in a professional context. I think in broader speaking, in humanity terms, the idea of giving people second chances is overlooked often. People condemned and kind of given their narrative quite often. You are this now, and I think that we're ever changing people every day. Perception changes. I think that people should be given more second chances. But when you come to something specific like addiction, there has to be a solid structure and trust and a working relationship.
Yeah, you have to put the line somewhere when it's something that can be so grey in a sense, but it is. I mean, it's a noble thing that you're doing with obviously what you've lightly touched upon there, and leading kind of on from the redemption side and forgiveness in a sense, it is kind of an odd segue, but obviously you have a child, and if you don't mind me asking, essentially, is when you were younger and when you were going through your sort of in height of the drug addiction and things, and then obviously when you went on your travels and sort of managed to kind of come more to terms with them and things, was it part of that? In that time, did you think that you were ever going to want kids or have children, or was it, you know, potentially your mother passing away that kind of triggered it? The reason I ask is because I kind of wanted a kid for a while, like when I was younger, like, yeah, maybe. And then once my dad passed away and I went through my sort of grieving period and things, when I came out of that, I was like, oh, now I do really want a kid because I want to, all the stuff that I lost out on with my dad, I want to try and be there for my kid and, you know, that sort of thing. I wondered if the life that you had led had any sort of impact in your future plans to becoming a father, and then obviously now that you are one, if in hindsight it maybe changed your perspective in any way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was 28 when I became a father, and I really wanted to be a dad. I didn't have like this kind of need to have a new family. I know some people kind of get this kind of almost primal feeling of like, God, I need to have a family. I need to have children. I didn't really have that. I had a very sort of kind of nice, kind of solid sense of like, yeah, I want to be a dad one day.
Yeah.
And thankfully, you know, I kind of met the right person and it happened. But the one thing I'd say is I was not prepared for fatherhood at all. I thought I was, but it's been a real kind of roller coaster for me, because what I've realized is when you have a child, it's like having a mirror. My daughter is kind of looks like me, behaves like me. Thankfully, she's not dyslexic, but she's just the same sort of child I was. She's very rebellious and very kind of high functioning in her imagination and stuff like that. And so what a real challenge for me has been putting in boundaries with her about behavior, because I didn't really get those from my parents. And so I've gone through this stage of sort of marking off years and going, wow, I've managed to get her this far and she hasn't fucked up yet. And it's like an ongoing process. And that can be really tricky because a lot of the time as a parent, you spend your time being the person that you know they need. And that is real hard work. It's so easy to just raise your kid and just be, fuck it, fuck it. I'm going to let you do that because that's what you want to do. And that has been a real challenge for me, is getting that line right between, letting it go close to the edge, but not over it. Which is, I think, something that all parents should consider is, I think really the test for if you're ready for a parent is, are you completely okay with your own parents and your own upbringing? Because it's the moment that you become a parent, you're going to start looking back into your early years and how you were raised and what your parents said and did to you, how they behaved, and you're going to start matching it with that. And so for me, it was quite a kind of, oh shit, I've kind of really opened the door to something here. I didn't expect it to be this intense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't have a child, so I don't have that knowledge of it. I've got some older brothers, and they've got nieces. They've got daughters and sons, which are my nieces and nephews. So I've had some degree of interaction with them, and obviously, I can see the parts of my brothers that are in them, and obviously, to some degree as well, me. Like I've got my niece. She is now 13. And we hang out occasionally and watch like a movie once a month or so. And the more she grows up, the more I can see of like myself and my brother in her. And obviously a lot of that comes from our dad. So it's like, it is interesting seeing those things. And I've spoken with my girlfriend, we've spoken about kids and stuff, and we're probably not going to venture down that until we're like much closer to 30. And it is one of those things I've kind of, I don't know if you had this sort of fear, but it's like, I know what I was like when I was a kid, and I could be a mouthy little this or mouthy little that, but generally I was a good kid, and that's fine. But I have that fear of like, what if they just, I mean, for this conversation, it worked in quite well. What if my kid becomes a drug addict? What if my kid, like, I'd never abandon them anyway. I'm not insinuating that, but like, there's that worry of what if my child starts to go down a path, and I try and help them, but you can't fully control your child. You can try and guide, but you can't control. So if you don't mind me asking, is that potentially a fear that you may have going down the line, or do you think that due to the environment that you're going to be raising her in along with your partner, that it's going to, obviously one would hope, mitigate and stop that happening?
Well, I think, when you're a parent, you always worry. I had to drop her off at her drama class this morning, and we're just getting to the point where I drop her off, she gets out of the car and she crosses the road on her own, and that scares the shit out of me. But she does it. In terms of the drugs thing, what I try and comfort myself with is the knowledge that when I started doing drugs, my parents didn't have any kind of education about drugs. They didn't have any experience with them. They didn't know how it worked. Yeah, I've been around drugs in my personal life and then in my professional life. So I can just tell if someone is using or if someone is, possibly going to use. So my radar is well on for it, and I'm perfectly ready to have a conversation with her, which is a genuine conversation about the pros and cons of doing drugs and doing them safely and where you're getting them from. And, are you sure you want to do this? But I ultimately wouldn't say, no, you're not doing drugs, because I think that would put up a barrier between us. And I'd be a hypocrite because she would say, well, have you done them? And I would have to say, yes, I did. So the conversation starts with, yes, I did. And I tell you what I wish I had and hadn't done in those. So, yeah, hopefully we're going to have a much more honest, careful conversation about those things. But I don't know. It could happen. It could happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things in my head where I've kind of thought about that with spoken with my partner, because she's not had any interaction with that sort of with drugs or anything like that, whereas myself, when I was a lot younger, I did as well. I did. So it's that thing of, as you've rightly pointed out, if I had a kid, I want to be as honest with them as possible, and I want to say to them, I don't want you to do drugs in a similar way that I would ideally not really want you to drink, because if you do these things, you get yourself in a more vulnerable position, you can hurt yourself, you can damage this, you can damage that, but it is your life. But if you're going to do these things, if you have a kid, if they're gonna, not kid, but if one of your children wants to drink alcohol when they're the right age or whatever, it's fine. As you go, okay, well, here's what you do. Make sure you don't down a whole bottle of vodka to yourself. That's probably not a good idea. If you do drink throughout the night and go to a house party, make sure you just have a glass of water, and before you go to bed, maybe have a little bit like a crisp or a doner kebab or something, whatever. Just maybe line your stomach a bit if you're going to do this. And I've said to my girlfriend, I've been like, when they get to college, I don't know what, or maybe even younger than that, more so probably end of secondary school, when they get to that age where it's like a potential, it's like, I don't want to go up to them and say, hey, cannabis is great, you should do it. It's like, obviously that's the wrong approach. It's not. But equally, it's a weird dynamic we're in the society and a lot of Western culture where with alcohol, that is the case. When, the thing is, oh yeah, my son's now 16, we have a barbecue and he has a Corona or two, or, that's a really, and with me, it's like, well, what if, my child got to a certain age and cannabis was legal, which I think it's probably going to happen in the next couple of decades, don't know how long it's going to be, but if that was the case, would I then be like, wait till my kid's 16 and then have a joint with them? Is that weird? Like social, like in our social and culture things, that sounds like a really weird thing to do, introducing your child to a substance which is illegal. But if it's legal, surely that's fine. And if it's not, then why is alcohol okay? We kind of, oddly enough, kind of loop back round to the whole weird legality side of it. So I've thought about it a bit, and I want to get your opinion on it, because I don't know, I wouldn't know how to approach my child about these sort of things. As you say, like I've done some stuff. If I tell them you should never do it, oh, have you done it? Yes, I have. Why can't I do it then? Well, that's a good reason. Why can't you? Because I don't want you to get hurt. Well, you didn't get hurt. Well, no, but you might. And you see what I mean?
Well, I think the thing is you're talking about, learning essentially, aren't you? And it's like, you wouldn't think twice about teaching your kids how to drive, why not teach them how to do drugs? if they want to. If my daughter's going to use drugs, I'd much rather I'd be there and talk to her about it than just some random dude that she doesn't know very well and I don't know very well. That is not a good idea. It's like, if you're going to learn how to drive, then you make sure that the guy's an instructor, he's got a car, he's got the mirrors, he's got everything, and he can say, yes, I do this, I've been tested, I'm okay to do this. And then you pay them for it because it's all safe. Then you don't have to worry about it. So if you're going to test cannabis, don't just go and sort of, oh yeah, I've heard this guy, you go and knock on his door and like, you go in and they're like, all right, who are you? And, you're like, wait, where are you from? That's fucking ridiculous.
Exactly.
Why would you treat something as important as a mind-altering substance and just leave that in the hands of some stranger who probably hasn't got the best intentions?
No, exactly. That's a very good point in that. And I want to ask as well, there's something which I want to ask you, and I think I've written it down. I think it may have been something either was said, I think it was said in one of your podcasts or something, but almost the idea of the pain of being normal. And I don't know if that was something you specifically said or if I kind of wrote it down in a similar way, but do you think there's a lot of pressure on people today to fit into this narrow way of being, this very much you have to do this, but have this job, have a family like this, don't do drugs, don't listen to this kind of music, don't do this, don't do that? Do you think that there's a lot of pressure on people into ways of kind of being unique and stuff and having to be different to loads and loads and loads of people, but also this weird thing of being kind of socially ostracized for being different? Like, what's your sort of opinion on the, in air quotes, normality and the way society perceives it?
I think it's a very tough time to live with identity. I think that it's a real challenge nowadays because you are kind of expected to fit in to a certain kind of demographic, and time is changing, culture is changing so quickly that from, my growing up of having no internet and no kind of mass kind of connection to the outside world from the small town that I grew up, my daughter's now grown up in a place where she can communicate with anyone, anytime. And what that leads to, I think, is overall the trend and the kind of idolization. Whereas when I grew up, it was pop stars, rock stars, movie stars. They're so fluent nowadays that they're kind of irrelevant. The best, most trendy thing you can be is immediate, to be able to appeal and to reach out and be connectable straight away. So whatever it is you're doing, you have to sort of have this kind of, I am the cutting edge, and it might only last for 5 minutes. Andy Warhol's 15-minute fame thing, that was way overjudged. It's a lot less than 15 minutes. People were like falling over themselves to get a tweet that is retweeted, to come up with the picture that causes controversy, or the punchline to the joke that is the most darkest joke that you can tell, or and I think we're going more and more towards pushing and pushing and pushing, to the point where it kind of becomes irrelevant what your style is or what your trend is. I think that the pressure that puts on young people is overwhelming. You can see it in them. I'd see like teenage girls and boys, and they haven't got a fucking clue who they are, and they're like panicky because they're looking in their phone for it, and then they're looking around, and there's this constant kind of, am I okay? Am I doing everything okay? Have I said the right thing? Am I looking cool? Is my my Instagram's cool? My Twitter's cool? That's how people connect to me. And I think it leaves people in this kind of flux state, where they're like, don't really know who the fuck they are. I think in the next 10, 20, 30 years, pop culture as it was known, or popular culture, is going to become very interesting, because it's becoming almost integrated with technology to the point where it's like, you can be absolutely anywhere in your world and doing your thing. You know, we've seen the breakdown of mass media in terms of newspapers and mass news organizations breaking down because people don't give a fuck about them. You know, their news is what is interesting to them, and what their angle on it is more interesting than any news person can tell you. So whereas we lived in a world where we were consumers and that would then inform our opinions, I think in the future our opinions will then inform the consumers, will inform the conglomerates. You know, they will start becoming reactive to us. Whereas we used to be like, oh, cool, you know, PlayStation's coming out and there's going to be a PlayStation 2, or like, have you seen my new Nikes, you know, or that kind of thing. I think it's going to flip, and it's going to be much more that we are calling the shots and saying, we want you to make us this. Why haven't you made it yet? You know? And I think that that's the kind of flip that's going on, but it leaves a lot of people feeling very anxious and very displaced and very out of touch with everyday kind of human conditions, which are, you know, I feel sad, or I feel happy, or, you know, I haven't got as much as that person. You know, wants and needs kind of get missed in this, because it's like whatever you were doing last week is fucking irrelevant now, because everyone else has done it. We've heard it. It's been remixed. It's been downloaded, and, you know, it's a product that is accessible, and then it's gone. It's consumed. We want the next.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's jumping off that. Are you generally more optimistic then about the future, both with sort of how social media and the internet is affecting people both positive and negatively, and also where the sort of cultural shift is going towards, you know, drug legality of cannabis, and then sort of decriminalization of other things? I think in Denver in America, I think they decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms and stuff. So not obviously the world being good is not equivalent to what drugs are legal, obviously, but in the general sort of social sphere and things, do you think that going forward it's going to get better? Do you think we're in a transitionary phase where things are just going to get better? It just kind of seems not that way at the moment, or are you more pessimistic?
I think we're in a huge, I think in a long time to go, we'll look back at this age as a really, really important time. Like you can do any sort of period in time, you know, but I think fundamentally, if you imagine, say, in 200 years' time, they'll look back at the year 2000 and they'll say, right, that's when the internet started. That's when people's ability to learn, communicate, and everything changed. I think we're vastly underestimating the impact that's having on human beings and society. I think, unfortunately, my own perception is that things have to get a lot worse, because across the world, you can kind of feel this kind of polarization and this divide between people that have and people that do not have. And whether that is wealth, whether that is equality, whether that's peace, whether that's rights, you know, whether it's opportunity, that's becoming the next big thing. Because it's kind of like, you know, you can't just go around blowing the fuck out of people because there's TV cameras everywhere now. So you can't just do things out in the front. So everything is done behind closed doors now. And I think we're leading to a point where, as a society, at some point, we're going to find ourselves with two quite opposing forces of the people that have and the people that don't have. Now, everything that I've been saying through today leads me to believe that the people that do have, at some point, must have some kind of awakening or some kind of reckoning when they say, you know what, this just is not fair. This is not right. And we need to find a way of including everybody. Because, you know, as a human race, we don't have that. There's a mass kind of difference in a person that's just randomly born on this planet. They're all part of the human race, but they're not treated the same. And we do have that power within us as a human race to say, it doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, what gender you choose to be. It doesn't matter what religion you are. You're going to be treated with respect. You're going to have education. You're going to have food. You know, no one's going to blow your house up. You're not going to be asked to do something that you shouldn't be asked to do. You know, you're going to have the opportunity. But I think in the build up to that, it's going to get pretty messy because there's going to be a lot of shouting and a lot of people saying, oh, why the fuck should I help that person? You know, I don't know them, you know. They're like that because of their religion. They're like that because of their culture. They're like that because of, you know, the idea that the internet and modern technology means that we can communicate with each other virtually around the world has to be replaced with the idea that we can actually communicate with each other around the world. Because being able to do a blog or a podcast or type a message, or I can send a tweet to Donald Trump right now and call him a twat, you know, well, what a victory for humanity, you know. But the other thing that I can do is I can read about like a crisis of humanity where there's like children. I can donate money because I do have more than enough money at the end of the month, you know, and I can highlight that. I can write about that. I can talk about that. And I can talk to my local MP. I can, you know, I can do as much as I can. And you see that with climate change, and you see that with, you know, gender rights and equal pay and all of that. And if you look over the last kind of 100 years, that's kind of become our marching beat, isn't it? It's like slavery. What? Yeah, let's get rid of that. And you know what? Women can't vote, right? Yeah, let's get rid of that. And then, you know, and how far are we going to keep pushing until we go, you know, that kid's got no opportunity in life. You know, they have to walk for education. They have to, you know, go hungry for days and shit. When we're going to say that's wrong as well?
Yeah, and I think we're coming near sort of the 2 hour mark, so I'll start to wrap up shortly.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, as well, sort of bouncing off what you said, I think the problem is, one of the biggest problems in life, and one of the things that causes a lot of issues nowadays is the fact that people don't look at the grey area anymore. What they want is the easy yes or no answer. And I think that what this conversation has really highlighted is with many aspects of both mine and your life, they probably more so yours, obviously, due to the difficulties you had earlier on, it would be a lot easier on you and a lot easier to deal with if people were a bit more understanding about things. And rather than just saying, oh, you're a young kid doing drugs, you're bad. Like, that's just how they see it. Or, you know, if you are addicted to drugs, it's your problem and that's that. Or other people going, no, it's 0% your problem. It is 100% everything else's fault. And it's like, neither of those answers are specifically that helpful necessarily, except to get a sort of conversation started. And it's a thing of, with social media, with the internet, and with just people in general, I don't really believe, because thinking of obviously what we said about Hitler earlier, you know, I believe Hitler was probably one of the closest to evil of people, but I don't think I even believe there is a good and evil anymore. I just think it's very rare for people to do something. There's the odd psychopath here and there who do just kill people for the thrill of it, but majority, a very, very, very vast majority of people, even if they do bad things, they are trying to do it in some sort of warped good reason in a sense a lot of the time. And or, you know, they want to provide for their family. Yeah, they're a drug dealer and they've, you know, maybe they've killed people and that's horrendous, but in their head, they're doing it for their young daughter. And it doesn't make it right, but it makes everything a lot more grey and a lot more cloudy. And I just think so many problems on Earth with the way humans interact with each other is expecting all other humans to adhere to some sort of level of perfection that no one can possibly go to, either on the far right or on the far left, or however you want to look at it, without just coming to common ground and trying to be understanding and see things as a more of a case-by-case basis of to what degree is one person to blame or one person not to blame, as opposed to just kind of blanket statementing. Do you think that that's kind of the black and white thing and the grey area of the world, that's something that caused or at least contributed to some of the large negative effects that you had growing up?
I think what we're talking about is, you know, what we're describing there is that, you know, in order to have an in-depth look at problems and to actually dedicate the time and the resources to looking at how we affect change in the world for a positive, it takes a lot of time. And we live in this absolutely automatic, immediate kind of world. So there's a disparity there, isn't there, between the need for thought and for planning and for proper time and resources dedicated to how do we change this, with the I need my fucking iPhone right now, and if it isn't working, then I'm going to throw it at someone. You know, really, again, coming back to care, I think the responsibility will flip from us, where we used to look at presidents and prime ministers and governments and republics to inform us as to how we behave and how we this is what we do, that we prosper. I think we've prospered enough now to the point where really we should be turning it back and saying, okay, we know how to live now. We know we've got laws. We know what trade means. We know what medicines we need. We know how to educate people. That's enough. We've self-actualized. Now what we want you to do is to make sure that this planet is going to be safe, and that we don't want violence. We don't want sexual abuse to people. All we want to do is live in a safe world where we don't have to worry about each other. Now that's your job. But that doesn't seem to be happening. The opposite seems to be that you turn the news on or you look for some guidance from the people that we've elected or the people in power, and they just fight each other. So there's that polarization kind of manifested by democracy. And I think it sounds very like an anarchist kind of view, but I think really we're already seeing humanity and mass public start to transcend that and say, you know what, that's not changing anything. I'm going to have to do this myself. I'm going to have to go around and like bang on doors and make signs and do petitions and stuff, because that's the way they listen to us, and that's the need, isn't it? Not like that's the flip that I hope will happen.
Okay, well that's absolutely wonderful, and I think we'll kind of sort of draw this to a sort of close here. But before we sort of wrap up, is there anything else that you want to sort of add? Any final comments? And also on top of that, would you like to plug your shows one last time? And yeah, that'd be wonderful. But yeah, please.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. It's been a pleasure. So Days of My Life podcast that we've spoken about is available now, thanks to you, Mike, who actually pointed it out. All of the episodes are live, because I did have it set so there was only 10. But I think there's 14 episodes. It's on a break at the moment, and there will be more episodes coming next year. It's an autobiography / memoir involving dramatic events and all the things we've spoken about. And the plug for the new show, which is called Room, you can find it through Aidan Rosewell on Twitter. There's a link there. There's a little 1-minute trailer that features voice actors and kind of short 10-minute stories in which we go on crazy little journeys, hopefully all based in real kind of human emotions and outcomes that you perhaps don't expect. And I hope it's going to be quite thought-provoking and accessible when it comes out.
Well, that's absolutely perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Aidan. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you, and I can't wait for you to release more episodes of Days of My Life, obviously next year, as well as Room. I'm very excited for them. So, thank you very much for having such an open and honest conversation with me.
You're welcome, Mike. Take care, mate. Have a good day.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. As I said at the start, and I think I may have said in the podcast as well, go check out Days of My Life. I've included a link in the description. It's a really, really good audio drama. The episodes aren't too long, and the fact that it's all real just makes it so much more impactful. So after hearing Aidan talk about some of his experiences and things, I think you can see that he's a very well articulated individual. So when he tells these stories in the audio drama format and things, they are really, really cool. So I definitely recommend you guys check that out. Just to clarify as well, I said it in the start because I forgot to mention it last week because I'm a dick. Frankly, there's no other excuse for that. I'm going to Italy next week. As some of you may know, my girlfriend is half Italian and she speaks several languages and is much more intelligent than I am. And so yeah, we're going to Italy to see some of her family. We're going from Sunday to Wednesday, and I won't be in. Essentially, I won't be about. And this podcast, as I've said, when I went away to Mexico, for any of you listeners who've been listening for more than like a few weeks will know that I love this show and it's a passion project, and I would like it to go somewhere financially at some point in the future, but at the moment it is still purely a passion project, and so I'm not going to run myself ragged being on holiday, spending several hours editing a show and putting it all together and all that sort of tomfoolery just and lose a whole day in Italy meeting Megan's dad for the first time and things. So exciting weekend for me, week, whatever, exciting time for me, frankly, but yeah, I just want to warn you guys of that. I'll probably put something on social media as well, because I really should have said in earlier episodes with the Mexico thing. I gave a lot more warning, but well, too late now. Yeah, coming up as well, I haven't actually got anything recorded, funnily enough. Me and Megan have actually spoke about doing a podcast together, which I think we will do at some point, to talk about her teaching and the several languages, the cultural differences between Italy and England, lots of other things like that. So that'll be a really interesting podcast that I'll do with her, but I think we've got that planned for a few weeks' time. I've got a podcast scheduled for the Sunday that I'm meant to be releasing the next episode. So that's going to be with my next guest. He's an author. He's written a book about sort of traveling and things quite a lot. So the second half of the year is quite a lot travel heavy, it seems. But, traveling is great for people and things, and so many different cultures you can experience. So it's always great to chat about those sort of things. So I imagine that'll be the one I release on that day. If not, if anything falls through in any way, it'll be with Megan, I would say. I'm in the middle of rescheduling the thing with the gentleman of the True Crime podcast. We have to keep rescheduling because he's got other things going on, and there's like a specific thing he's doing at the moment, which I don't want to talk too much about because it's not my business necessarily to tell, but also I don't want to necessarily hint too hard who it is. But he's just got a lot of stuff going on right now, and he's really, really close to being finished with the thing that he's doing. So it's just easier for him if we just delay it a little bit longer. I imagine it'll be December or maybe even January now. So any true crime fans listening to this show, I'm sorry you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer before I chat to that individual. As well as I've got a few other chats lined up with other podcasters and things. I'm thinking about getting Josh on. I think I spoke to him briefly, and he said he may be able to do something soon for another Science But Simple. My buddy Alex Hart, who any of you will know him because I did an episode quite early on with him. I've done a couple of movie episodes with him, actually. I think I've done 2 best of movie episodes. Well, I did one just about movies, another best of, and I think I did one about nature and stuff a while ago as well. So he's been on like 3 times. He spoke to me about doing a end of the year movies roundup-y podcast, and any of you guys who listen to me a lot or follow me on Instagram know I'm a big movie buff. I go to the cinema quite a lot and stuff, so we'll talk about that. Alex gets to see loads of crazy random films that no one's ever heard of, and then they're normally amazing, so I'm excited to speak to him at the end of the year, and he's one of my favourite people in the world, so I really always look forward to hanging with him and stuff. But that's really everything for me, guys, at the moment, without this turning into a huge rambly mess, which I don't really want it to because it's been a crazy busy day. If any of you have been keeping up with me on social media, you may have seen my story. I recently did a Halloween thing dressed up as Jim from Friday Night Dinner. I'm going to put a video on that online probably around Halloween time, in brutal honesty, because it's going to be near Halloween, and so more people are going to be posting silly pictures, so it's a bit more fun to get in with that. But I shaved my moustache, and we'll see that I'm currently near enough clean shaven. I look like a complete dick. I look much better with a beard. But yeah, I was doing like a Friday Night Dinner impression all night with like a little cuddly toy dog that I was dragging with me. Like Jim's the neighbour in Friday Night Dinner, if anyone who listens who doesn't know what I'm talking about but kind of does. Yeah, it's a character from that. I got a couple of videos. I got loads of pictures of me looking like a twat, so it's good. It kind of looks like Ned Flanders, but a lot creepier. If anyone doesn't know Friday Night Dinner, I recommend people go check that out. I think that's really it, guys. Apart from me debating whether or not to do a very brief impression of Jim, but I think it's going to be deeply offensive, but maybe I'll just it's just like, hello Jackie, shalom Wilson. That's generally how he sounds. So I was doing that for a lot of the night, and I was quite intoxicated by the end, and we were up till 3 a.m. this morning, basically at a club dancing to alternative music. A lot of Panic at the Disco and All Time Low and a bit of Billie Eilish and things like that were playing. So lots of fun from me. So make sure you keep up with me on social media. Instagram's where I do the most stuff. I put stories on there. And I post movie reviews once a week or so, maybe. I've got my new tattoo that's finished now. I will be sharing pictures of that soon. I'm hoping in the next week. I keep forgetting to do it. And yeah, I'm hoping to see Zombieland 2. That's probably going to be in about 3 weeks now, so the review for that will be quite late. But my review for Joker's up and all that sort of jazz. I thought Joker was incredible. But anyway, I'm going to stop now because it's getting near 6 minutes as an outro. So thanks all for tuning in, guys. Sorry for rambling. As always, I love each and every one of you, especially listening all the way to the end, share in all the usual places, give Aidan Rosewell some love and Emotionally 14, and I'll talk to all of you hopefully week after next.